Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's so good to see all of you. I just have one quick announcement for the group. I was wrong about the mobile app. There is a student app for Blackboard, and if you download it to your device, you'll be able to access the content during the day, especially if you don't have access to a desktop or a laptop at work. All right, so don't forget, assignments are due Friday, midnight Eastern Standard Time. I will send a reminder. Let me know if you need an extension, and I am happy to work with you. Okay, Deanna, I'm going to spotlight your video.
Sounds good. Oh boy, I'm on the big screen now. Well, welcome everyone to our very first webinar Wednesday, or our weekly webinar. I know that we spoke on Monday in our orientation, but as just a little housekeeping, as you log in, please make sure your mic is muted. Sandra also might mute your mic if you're getting a lot of feedback as Dr. Haynie is speaking. But just wanted to say welcome everyone. I'm glad that you're here. We are going to record this session. We want to make sure, I did have a couple of people say that they were not able to attend the live session tonight. Because of the information that's going to be shared today, we want to make sure that the class gets that information. So without further ado, I don't want to take too much time. Last thing that I have is I know I heard from one person so far, if you for some reason did not receive a welcome packet, if you send me an email, I'll put my email again in the chat, but if you send me an email that you did not receive it, I will check the tracking and see what happened, and we will get another one to you ASAP. None of the stuff in the packet is required to take the course. It's just some helpful tools and some goodies that we wanted to send you as part of the first cohort. So with that being said, I want to introduce you to the director of small entrepreneurship and small business. She is in charge of all of our programs that we have in the Arsenal portfolio, which is our entrepreneurship portfolio. She's my boss. We've been working together for quite a few years. And we just wanted to, she was not available to come on Monday. It made more sense really for her to come in today just to talk to you all and just to welcome you to the class. So without further ado, I'm going to send it to Misty Fox.
Thanks, Deanna. You know, in the wise words that I've once heard, it's be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. And I know that the real show's yet to come. So I will also be brief. I do just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us in this pursuit. I know that, you know, Dr. Haynie will get into it here in a little while, where EBV itself just started as an idea in the summer program that he had and has now grown into quite the institute and now the National Veteran Resource Center and much, much more. But as the programming has grown up, and so too has the institute, what we've realized is that entrepreneurship programming needs to meet you where you're at and now, in these unprecedented times, we're in a new place, which means that we're now also online. So I know all of you all were EBV applicants, and I just appreciate you jumping in with both feet as we have now launched Spark and joining us for this one. And I just really want to say welcome to the IVMF family. I know that we'll continue to see you all in, you know, further programs as we move forward. And I know that I've already seen a few of you in some other things. I see a Vet Edge, a Vet 50 background there below. So with that, I'm going to introduce, I guess, now my boss, really, Dr. Haynie. He really needs no introduction, but Air Force veteran, professor at heart, vice chancellor, basically oversees anything that is a special project at the university, and then also much, much more for a day job. But with that, I'll hand it over to him to kind of tell you the story of how EBV came together, and then go into, you know, the opportunity recognition and some Q&A there. So with that, Dr. Haynie.
So thanks, Misty. Welcome everybody. This is a new innovation, a new experiment for us in the era of coronavirus. I wish I was welcoming you all in person tonight. It's a beautiful, nice night in upstate New York. We'd probably have you out, you know, on a lake somewhere for a little evening meal. I apologize that we're not able to do that. But I am thrilled to be here. You know, as Misty said, I'm a former Air Force officer. I had the good fortune that while I was serving the Air Force, they kept sending me off to school to include to the University of Colorado for a couple of years to pursue a PhD in entrepreneurship and innovation. And I after that that assignment, I went to the Air Force Academy and I taught at the Air Force Academy, fell in love with teaching and really being around students. And in 2006, got out of the Air Force and made my transition out of the military to Syracuse University as an entrepreneurship professor. Ironically, that transition, I had no intention of doing anything related to veterans or the military. I wanted to be a college professor, but this program, or at least the variant of this program that exists on the campus of Syracuse University and now a network of other universities around the country, was something I started shortly after I arrived at Syracuse, because it was something I could do. Here I was, a veteran myself and an entrepreneurship professor, and we had significant numbers of folks transitioning out of military service, both with aspirations for business ownership and also at the time, folks facing barriers to traditional employment. Significant numbers of veterans with service-connected disabilities leaving the military, and from my perspective, I saw an opportunity, to do something that could impact the only family that I had known up to that point in my professional life, which was the military. And so we launched a small program in 2007 called the Entrepreneurship Bootcamp for veterans, and that initial program brought all of 17 veterans to Syracuse University for an immersion experience around business ownership. And even then, for me, that program was just going to be something I did over the summer. And truth be told, it was more impactful than any of us thought. And one of the things that candidly surprised us was that we had other universities come to us at the time and say, how can we be part of this? So we expanded the EBV program that year, or that next year, to UCLA and to Texas A&M, and then to Florida State, and then to LSU, and then to Missouri, and to UConn and Purdue. And fast forward a bunch of years, we've gone from 17 veterans in that inaugural program to last year, I think just over 14,000 service members, veterans, military family members that graduated from now a whole portfolio of career preparation, skills training programs that we run through the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. That said, I am at my core, my passion is around entrepreneurship. And this is how I got started doing this work. I am an entrepreneurship professor by faculty appointment, by academic training. I teach and study entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs for a living. So the point of all that is to say, I'm uniquely grateful for the opportunity to spend a little time tonight with all of you talking about entrepreneurship. I understand that, Misty, is that enough for, sort of the history and the overview?
I think you captured it. Yeah.
Good. That's less exciting for me than I think talking about the reason that everybody else is here. Let me say a few things about, I've been doing entrepreneurship in the veteran space now for 14 years. And let me first share a couple things I've learned that may be jumping off points later for a conversation and for some questions. I think first off, one of the things that I have learned, and it's actually the subject of a book that I'm working on right now, is that all of you are uniquely prepared to succeed as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as a function of your experience in military service. I think one of the things that is less intuitive about the military service experience is that it uniquely prepares you for success as an entrepreneur. One of the very classic academic definitions of what it means to be an entrepreneur is as follows: entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity in the face of inherently constrained resources. And if you think about what entrepreneurs do, that's it. what entrepreneurs do, the magic of entrepreneurship is about trying to figure out how you create value for a consumer in a way that exceeds all the alternatives that that consumer has to solve a given problem, and do it creatively and innovatively, such that the value proposition to the consumer leaves them with no choice than to pursue your product solution, your service solution, and to me, that's the magic that lives at the intersection of military service and business ownership. If you think back to your experiences in the military and that definition that I gave you, the pursuit of opportunity in the face of inherently constrained resources, that's what you learned how to do. You were told, here's a mission, here is the set of resources you have, figure out how to get it done. And that experience, that learned ability I'll be very academic for a second, to do something called effectuation. Effectuation is a term that is used to describe essentially making do with what you have to create something new. And that ability to effectuate is essentially what you learned as a consequence of your military service. And it's at the core of what entrepreneurship is all about. If you think about opportunity recognition, for me, opportunity recognition exists at the intersection of problems and solutions. You probably saw me in some bad video talk about that before this engagement, but that to me is a really powerful idea that should be at the core of how you think about what you do. If you think and look throughout history at every great entrepreneur, every all of the folks that you read about and see on magazine and on entrepreneurship and business magazine covers, all of them, what they have in common is they figured out how to solve a problem for someone in a way that exceeds, as I said earlier, exceeds the available alternatives. And what I've done over the course of the last 14 years as an academic is actually study how those folks make decisions. There is a lot about business and the principles of business that are generalizable between what I would describe managing an existing concern or an existing business and launching and growing a new venture. But what launching and growing a new venture have as unique to that particular experience is this idea of seeing an opportunity to create value for a consumer that other people don't see. One of my favorite examples, and if we were in person, I would pull out from behind the podium my own personal Starbucks apron. Now, I've never worked at Starbucks, but Starbucks is one of my favorite examples. And Howard Schultz, the former CEO and chairman, is one of my favorite examples of this idea of opportunity recognition. I don't know how many folks know the founding story of Starbucks, but one of the first big myths is that Howard Schultz founded Starbucks. It's actually not true. Starbucks was created by a couple buddies out in Seattle who had the idea that they were going to sell coffee beans. They didn't actually sell coffee. They sold coffee beans. And Howard Schultz at the time was an appliance salesman based out of New York. And he was looking at, month to month, all of his orders, and he couldn't understand why there was this little shop out in Seattle that month over month was ordering all of these coffee grinding machines from the company he worked for. So he got curious and hopped on an airplane and flew out to Seattle to find out, who these guys were that were ordering all these coffee machines. you know, when he got out to Seattle, what he found was this little shop in downtown Seattle that had bins and buckets and baskets of coffee beans that people could go in and buy and take home. The reason that they were selling all these coffee grinders is for people to actually turn those coffee beans into coffee, a product. They had to grind them themselves. So, you know, this little shop was also selling people coffee grinders. And Howard showed up and said, you know, why don't you sell coffee? And they said, well, we don't want to sell coffee. We want to sell coffee beans. The whole point is to let people, you know, take these gourmet beans and take them home and make coffee. And he had just come back from a trip to Europe, and he had experienced this coffee culture in Italy and Austria. And, you know, he badgered these guys forever, you know, just try it, just sell some coffee, see what happens. And they wouldn't do it. So he borrowed some money from friends, from family, etc., and showed up out there and said, let me buy your shop. And they sold their little coffee bean shop to him. And the first thing he did was threw a few tables in that shop and ground up some coffee and just gave it away. People could sit there, sample the coffee, and, you know, then he started selling it. And then he started transitioning the shop from, you know, just selling raw beans to selling various kinds of, you know, the point of this story is that right there in front of these two guys selling coffee beans is $100 billion idea, quite literally $100 billion idea that they couldn't see. You know, the question becomes, how is it that Howard Schultz could see that $100 billion idea, and the folks who own it, the folks who own the intellectual property, the infrastructure, everything required at the time to make it happen, couldn't see it? To me, that's a fascinating question. And to me, that's what differentiates the entrepreneur from everybody else. You know, my hope is that in the context of this program, albeit different from, you know, how we normally deliver this program, that one of the things that you take away from it is the beginnings of the ability to see those opportunities in the environment that other people don't see, and then in parallel, the tools to turn around and act on that opportunity. You know, how is it that you build, you know, a supply chain to support the implementation or the action on that opportunity? How is it that you do conduct the due diligence to understand the market, to understand the industry, to understand the basis for how you will successfully compete with others relative to, you know, oh, I forgot to silence my phone. In a classroom, I would have said to you, silence your cell phones. I would have done the same. But, you know, how is it that you harvest the opportunity? That's academic speak for how do you turn that idea into dollars in your pocket? You know, those are the tools. But, you know, I'll be very honest with you. Anybody can teach you the tools. Harvard can teach you the tools, and your local community college can teach you the tools. The magic is in this idea that of what's much harder to teach, and that is, how do you develop the instinct and the intuition and the understanding related to this idea of opportunity recognition. You know, there's a couple things I'll point to as hints in that direction, but it probably will be more productive if I stop talking at some point relatively soon and let you guys engage with me in a conversation. But, you know, one of the first things I would encourage you to do is start to think about how you reframe your thinking about your product offering, your service offering. You know, whether it's real today or an aspiration down the road. in this or around this framework of problems and solutions. Too often, people looking to launch a business start with a solution, and it's the wrong place to start. I have this great idea for a product or a gadget or a service. You know, what folks don't realize that sort of adopt that approach is that they're putting what's the saying, the cart before the horse. Just because you think you have a great solution to some ambiguous problem doesn't necessarily mean that that problem is significant relative to building a marketplace for your idea, you know. And I think you may have seen me in the video, maybe not. I'm not exactly sure what video they showed you, to be honest with you.
Mike, it's the video from Ignite DC in
Okay.
I think it was 2018.
So I probably in that video pulled my little trick of going through a list of headlines from the New York Times, right? You know, so one of the ways that I think I found effective to drive this point home to people is, you know, I encourage you to pick up a newspaper, a national paper, a local paper tomorrow, and just start paging. And you know, maybe I'm showing my age when I say pick up a paper. Maybe pull up a paper online. I don't know, but just start looking at the headlines. And one of the things you'll notice in that exercise is just from the headlines, you will begin to identify problems, and problems that, because they're, for example, in the newspaper, probably have meaning to a lot of people, such that if you think about and turn your attention to solving then those problems. And I'll give you an example. I think, matter of fact, from the likely an example I used in that video. So I think when I put that presentation together, I had looked at, you know, just a random issue of the New York Times, and one of the headlines in that issue of the New York Times related to the growing number of single mothers pursuing professional careers. And if you take that headline and that content and start thinking about, given only that knowledge, that there is a trend in society of a growing number of single mothers pursuing professional careers, and then ask yourself, what are the challenges that population faces? Challenges like childcare, challenges like dating, challenges like shopping, you know, routine daily activities of living kind of challenges, and start your brainstorming, your thinking with those problems, and then subsequently turn your attention to creative ways to solve those problems. That heuristic, that approach to thinking about opportunity recognition as a function of identifying problems that people experience in the world, and then you bringing your creativity and your you know, innovation, if you will, to solving those problems. The outcomes, and research supports this, the outcomes of that process are much more likely to generate a problem solution relationship that you can build a business around than the opposite direction, meaning that starting with solutions and trying to fit that round peg into some square hole out there in the marketplace. So, you know, the idea of really focusing on problems and solutions. Another is this idea of challenging existing assumptions. You know, and now I'll bring some psychology into this for a second. You know, one of the most significant biases that people experience as they perceive and make sense of the world is the bias of the status quo. The idea that we view the world and the environment that we live in, that we interact in, through this lens of how it has always been, it creates massive blind spots as it relates to seeing and acting on opportunity. So this learned ability to essentially challenge the status quo, challenge the assumptions as to how people have always done things, if you will, is a great way to become sensitized to opportunities to do things differently that you could ultimately monetize, to put it very bluntly, as a function of creating value for people in different ways. I often get questions from folks about, is there a good time or a bad time to start a business? And we're going through some challenges right now in this country, and they're economic challenges, they're social challenges, they're cultural challenges. I would argue, and I have argued this in the past, that the best time to start a business is not when everything's going great. Because guess what? If you go back to this idea of entrepreneurial opportunity is born at the intersection of problems and solutions. When things are going great, when everyday people aren't experiencing significant challenges in their lives, the universe of what's possible in terms of solving meaningful problems for people is less, as opposed to when times are tough, whether we're talking about economic, social, cultural, et cetera. The space available to you to bring to market innovative solutions to real problems people are experiencing every day is much greater. So I applaud all of you for, at this moment in time, thinking about pursuing business ownership, growing and scaling an existing venture, because I think this really is an opportunity-rich environment right now.
Hey, Mike, right there, I think I have a really good question for you that I think can spur off of that.
I'll just keep on talking, so that's a good thing.
That's fine. I think just because I think it would make a good leeway, we already had 2 people post some questions in the group chat. And I think, Bob, I'll get back to your question. I think Jason's question is about what we're talking about right now, and then we'll go on to Bob's. But Jason had a question on, what do you think the best way of finding your passion versus just starting a business because you may have talent without passion? How do the two go hand in hand, and how much does it matter? Well,
so again, if we were in person, and I was giving you my sort of standard opportunity recognition talk, you would see that the entire back end of that talk is focused on passion. The thing that people that do what I do every day, people who study entrepreneurship from an academic perspective, and what we've been trying to figure out for 25 years is, what is it about individuals, their background, their experiences, et cetera, that make the difference between being successful and not. And what I would tell you is that as a community of people who study this, we've been utterly unsuccessful to figure that out. It might surprise folks, maybe it won't, that there's actually, in the research, there's no correlation between success as an entrepreneur and actually education, believe it or not. Level, meaning credentialed education, college degrees, things like that. You're just as likely to be successful as an entrepreneur with a high school degree as you are with a PhD. There's very little correlation between family history as an entrepreneur. There's very little correlation between success as an entrepreneur and some unique set of experiences that you may have. But guess what? The one thing that we can point to as proven by research 30 years of research is the correlation between passion and success as an entrepreneur is through the roof. To the question, the idea of launching a business because you have a particular skill and think you can make some money, but you have no passion for the product or service that you're creating and how it could change someone's life. I would encourage you not to start that business because it's too hard. Entrepreneur, this is a hard thing. There's a reason that entrepreneurs use that saying, well, I have a wife, but I'm married to my business, or I have a husband, but I'm married to my business. It's because this is not a 9-to-5 job. And if you're not passionate about the work, if you don't wake up every day excited about going in and working to take that business to the next step, to secure those next 10 customers or that next contract, you won't last very long as a business owner. The challenge, though, as the question points out, the challenge is figuring out what that passion is. I did something when I first started doing this work. There was no professional incentive at all in my academic career for me to launch a program teaching vets to become business owners. Matter of fact, it was only disincentives. The incentives, professional incentives for me at the time were to publish my research, do excellent teaching in the class. Those were in the classroom. Those were the serve on committees in the business school. Those were the things that were going to get me promoted. Those were the things that were valued in the context of my professional career. But my passion, I quickly found out, was doing this work. And the idea that 14 years later I'm still doing it, and certainly when now in a very different way, there's very few professional incentives. I'm sitting here talking to the whatever 35 of you at 6:30 on a Saturday night after working all day on my day job, which is as the vice chancellor of a university with a $1.6 billion annual operating budget and 12,000 employees. This is my passion, and I think you have to figure out for yourself what that is. I would be willing to bet for you that at some level it's going to come back to connecting with people. The idea that you can, I have watched entrepreneurship, business ownership change people's lives, change communities, create opportunities for people with disabilities when those people were told by traditional employers that there's no place for them, to create opportunities for single mothers, a young female veteran raising a kid on her own. Business ownership was the thing that she could do to create a professional path for herself, for her family, find meaning and purpose. But it's hard, and I would actually discourage you from launching a business simply because you see it as a pathway for short-term financial gain if you have no passion for it. That's probably more than you wanted, but that was
that's
I think
great.
you kind of knew that was a soapbox question for me.
No, that's great, Mike. I wanted to ask that just because we were on the topic. And I'm going to go back to Bob's question. And then after that, feel free, you guys can unmute yourselves and ask direct questions to Dr. Haynie. But Bob had a question on, what do you think the #1 determinant of success is for veteran entrepreneurs? Or is there a #1 determinant?
So I'm going to give you the softball answer, which is to point to the soapbox that I just got down from. This idea of building a business that you're passionate about, that you can get excited about. I think that Now I'll do the tough love thing. There was a talk I gave at a Veteran Edge conference a few years ago that I haven't given since, and it was a little bit of a risk, and I was worried about how it was going to be received. And I'm going to use one word of profanity here for a second, because I'm going to be honest and tell you what the title was. The title of this presentation was "Stupid Shit Veteran Business Owners Do." Because the other thing that I realized after 10 years of doing this work is there are some things that are barriers to this particular population specifically, and it's a different way of answering the question. Number one determinant of success, I think that's passion. But I'm going to take the opportunity to tell you a couple things that are sure to drive you to failure, that might be unique to this particular population. I'll give you two. I think my presentation, I had 12. I think I had 12 things I talked about, but I'm going to give you two. One is more so than non-veterans pursuing business ownership, more so than the students that I typically see coming through classes, et cetera. Veterans often come into business ownership with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And specifically that chip is, I don't need to ask for help. I can do this on my own. I don't need advice. I don't need counsel. Let me tell you very, very clearly, that whole myth about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship being about that lone wolf who wanders out there by herself or by himself, and figures it out and perseveres in the face of all these obstacles, it is entirely BS. Everything we know, I have interviewed, close to 5,000 entrepreneurs. I carry around I have a little green book. It was actually the little book those hardcover green books that you got in the military, those notebooks. I turned one of those into my, essentially little entrepreneurship diary where I meet successful entrepreneurs. I ask them questions like the question that you just asked me, what drives you to success? And, one of the things I hear over and over and over again is to acknowledge all of the people that stand next to those entrepreneurs, clear a path in front of those entrepreneurs, line up behind those entrepreneurs, to support and enable their success. And veterans, maybe more than others, sometimes seem to have a resistance to allowing people to help them. And I would encourage you to try to be a little self-aware in that regard. There are lots of people who want to help you. Lots of people who want to help you because you want to be a business owner. Lots of people who want to help you because you are a veteran. Take advantage of every resource that folks put in front of you, and be willing to ask and accept help. The other thing I'll highlight about veterans very specifically is we love our tribe, and we love to engage with and sort of situate our efforts inside the veterans community with and among other veterans. And there's a lot of good that comes with that, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of missed opportunity that comes with that as well. For example, in various cities around the country, not all, but some, you'll find veteran chambers of commerce. And when these things first started popping up, I was intrigued, but I'll be very honest with you. As over the course of the last decade, and I've watched these veteran chambers of commerce spring up around the country, I'm really conflicted by them, because I realize that we have to get out of our silo. The extent to which we can maximize the opportunities that we could create by networking with people different from us, by connecting and doing business with people that don't have the same set of experiences that we do. To live in that veteran silo is not helpful from the perspective of launching and growing and scaling a business over time. So, but that's where we're comfortable, and often it takes a lot of work to get veterans to sometimes see beyond that silo to all of what's possible out there in terms of bridging to other communities of people that are positioned to help and support them. So again, another very long answer to what was a simple question, but.
That's okay. It looks like we have Helena who would like to ask a question. She is raising her hand. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. Thank you.
Good evening, EBV Sparker. So when I hear you talk about passion and hear you talking about a lot of that family support, what do you recommend for the entrepreneurs or veteranpreneurs who don't have that family support in place, who don't have that friend, who doesn't necessarily have that friend network, but they still have a passion and a desire for what they're doing? How do they tap into the other resources to kind of, you know, keep them motivated or help them connect to other people? Because a lot of veterans are just in a me zone. So how do we help?
Yeah.
You know, how do we stay focused?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It goes back to some of what I just got done saying. You got not only get out of the me zone, get out of the veteran zone to the extent you can. I do encourage you in your local community. I keep looking now because I found you up on the screen, so I'm wanting to answer you up here, and it doesn't look like I'm looking at you. Join your local chamber of commerce. Not a veteran chamber. Just join your chamber of commerce. Get involved in local business organizations, and also let me take you back to something that Misty and Deanna said at the opening of this. You have a family now. You might not know it, but once you're part of our family, you're stuck with us. We will continue to reach out and engage. You know, that part of I think what we found is really magical about the work that we do, and it's as important as any training that we ever do, is actually creating community. You know, working to connect all of you with the hundreds and thousands of other people who have aspirations to walk in the same shoes that you're walking in right now with regard to business ownership, and we're gonna push those connections. We're gonna try to sort of pull you out of that me zone, if that's what I heard you say, and connect you to others trying to realize the same aspirations, goals, and objectives. But you know, I think at the end of the day, and this is one of those that you might not like what I say, but it is on you. You know, there's only so much others can do. You know, so the extent to which you can, even if, you know, so here I am chatting away to all of you. I will tell you, I am a huge introvert. I have this odd ability in a classroom or in a forum like this to get up on the stage and chat and talk. But if we were out there in the world, you would see me sitting in a corner by myself, you know, looking around and observing. It's not natural for me in most settings to go out there and be that extrovert, that connector, et cetera. But what I've come to understand and learn is that I at least now can recognize the situations where I have to force myself to do that, where I have to push myself into an uncomfortable place because it's my job or because it's what is necessary for me to achieve some goal or objective that I have professionally. So part of it is learn how to do that for yourself. But you know, it's also finding the folks who are going to do it for you naturally as well. You know, plugging into that community.
Thank you, Mike. We have a couple questions in the chat that came through. So the first one would be, when you're considering, so I'll say this with this bit of background. We have a good group that has already started business. We have still some who are really in that ideation phase. And so with that being said, when someone is concerning starting a business, can you tell us a few questions that we should be asking ourselves as we're figuring out and working through our idea?
So a few questions. So maybe I'll start by saying, talk to lots of people. You know, here's another thing that was on my veterans do list that I'll share with you. Just this question reminded me. Man, sometimes veterans are paranoid. They don't want to tell anybody about their idea because they're worried somebody's going to scare it or steal it. Get over that. You know, at the end of the day, if you're not willing to talk to other people about your business idea, get their feedback, etc., man, it's going to be hard for you to get anything off the ground. The odds of somebody stealing your idea, it's not, I can't say it could never happen, but from a risk and reward perspective, the reward of talking and sharing and soliciting feedback far exceeds the risk that someone's gonna take your idea. So, you know, I bring that up to say, you know, back to the question, you know, the questions you ask yourself, you know, one of those questions is, do I really understand deeply and intimately enough about the value proposition that I'm trying to, you know, the value proposition that I'm trying to create? A good example, I can't count the number of folks who have come through this program, et cetera, that want to start bars, gyms, or restaurants. I'm not going to ask for, because I can't see you all, but if we were in a classroom, I'd say, hey, who in the room wants to start a bar, gym, or restaurant? When I encounter those folks, the first thing I say have you ever worked in a bar, gym, or restaurant? If you can't tell me that you worked in a bar, gym, or restaurant, you shouldn't be starting a bar, gym, or a restaurant. You know, and that's sort of a flippant example to say, you know, one of those key questions is really critically asking yourself, do I truly understand enough about this market, about the customers that I'm proposing to serve, in order to create a value proposition, a product or a service offering that truly meets their needs. You know, one of the very cool things that I've done for the last 3 years, I'm on this thing called the CNBC Disruptor 50 Council. So this is a group of 50 entrepreneurs and academics like myself that each year get to select the 50 most disruptive, industry disrupting new companies in America. You know, and it's a big deal to get on this list, et cetera. But for me, it's fascinating because I get to see the origin of these new, very transformative products, services, et cetera. And one of the things I can tell you from that experience is almost every one of those companies that ends up on that CNBC Disruptor 50 list is a company founded by somebody who worked for a significant period of time or had some significant experience in the industry, in the business, if you will, that they eventually launched for themselves. And, you know, the point I guess I'm trying to make is they had really deep knowledge of the customer, of the market, and of the industry, such that they were able to create a product or a service that turned that market or industry on its head, because it redefined the basis for competition. It changed companies like Amazon, you know, companies like Uber, that fundamentally redefined a long status quo value proposition for how someone gets from place to place, or how someone purchases products and goods. It's this idea of really understanding customers, industries, and the market you're going to compete in deeply before you take your own time and your own capital to launch a business is critically important. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have more questions. The next one is about doing business with your spouse. So we get a lot of support. we get a lot of support. Usually spouses give support when they're in an active duty. So what are your recommendations, or do you have any recommendations on going into business with your spouse?
So I don't even know if I want to touch this one, honestly. So I will tell you, I've seen really powerful, good examples of this working well. And no kidding, I've seen business ownership destroy marriages. And I'm not even, that's not an exaggeration. I've seen business ownership destroy marriages. So I hesitate to give you a definitive answer. It should be telling enough that there are actual therapists all over the United States whose only clients are husband and wife business owners. That should tell you all you need to know about those dynamics. I guess all I would say is think long and hard, have lots of conversations, be transparent, and set shared expectations. There's a great story that a case study that I used to teach it. It was the very first greeting card company, custom greeting card company to go online. And, so this was the first company where you could, for example, all through the internet, do online wedding invitations and, customize them and do things like that. It was a husband and a wife. And they actually, the market, if you will, was very excited about this company. They got tens of millions of dollars of private investment, venture capital. The wife was the CEO and the husband was the director of marketing. And they finally launched this business, and the husband had this great idea, or he thought to have this great idea of how they were going to introduce this company to the world with a bang. And he took their entire year's marketing budget, which was like $2 million, and he bought one Super Bowl commercial with that $2 million. Now, who do you think the customer is for, an online company that does wedding invitations and invitations to baby showers and all that kind of stuff? It's probably not the same viewer who's watching the Super Bowl. They lasted 3 months. They were out of business 3 months later. And then so was their marriage a little while after that. So a lot of pitfalls there. Just be careful.
Thank you. Moving on to kind of a little different subject. Helena had another question on, how much should you talk before the patents are filed? So like how much talking should happen before you actually go out and do that?
Again, I have a personal view on this, and my personal view is consistent with what, should you be handing out schematics? No. Should you be having lots of conversations? Because even a patent, once you file a patent, that's it, right? And if 2 weeks later you have to go, you find out something new, et cetera, and then you have to go back and refile, adapt it. You can file another patent, but the idea of soliciting, I'm a big believer in talking to people about my ideas and soliciting their feedback. I cannot point to one instance in the context of my professional career where sharing an idea for an innovation, this program is a perfect example. This program got off the ground because I had the spark of an idea, and I picked up the phone and I called a colleague at Florida State University, another entrepreneurship professor who actually served in the Air Force as well. and I started brainstorming this kernel of an idea with that guy 3 times a week for 2 months. And after those 2 months, we had we had built from, you know, what for me was a three sentence idea about bringing veterans to a university and putting them through a program to help them launch businesses, to, you know, a model for a curriculum and how we would leverage speakers, and how, you know, the extent to which that little idea flourished just as a function of those conversations made the difference between us having this conversation today and something that probably would have died after we did it the first time. So I'm a big believer in talking and sharing. Now, you know, you might want to think about not just parking yourself on a random street corner and talking to anybody that passes by. Talk to people you trust. Talk to people that that you respect, that you think can actually add value. But you know, I do think that being the willingness to have those conversations and receive the feedback, importantly, you know, that I realized very quickly, if I were on the phone with one of you and you want to talk about your idea, and 5 minutes into it, every time I offered a suggestion or a thought, you had an answer for me, you wouldn't know it, but I'd be done talking to you. I'd still go through the motions, but what you're signaling to me is you're not receiving the feedback I'm giving to you. If every response is a defense or a justification for, well, that doesn't, you know, I've already thought of that, and here's the answer, it tells me you're not receiving what I'm teeing up. Be open to it. Be genuinely open to it. Over.
Thank you, Mike. I think if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Carvarese, I believe you had a question. He had his hand up, and then after that, I have a question from Doug.
Got it.
Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. It's Kavaris.
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 Right?
I just retired, you know, like 2018 after 20 years in the Navy. So you had a lot of good feedback as far as, like you said, with the isolated veteran thought. So I was kind of paying attention to that before I retired, and I kind of just sit back and observed a lot of my peers who retired prior to me, just looking at some of their different challenges. You're right. But when I retired, my entire goal was to just not get any input from anybody from the service for the time being, just to see how I stand out there independently in the civilian side. And I definitely wanted to reprogram myself prior, you know, and I was working on that probably for quite some time before I retired. But you're right. But I wanted to see if I could do it on my own. And then it wasn't about not neglecting resources, because like you said, we're constantly a tight-knit group, and we're always there even when we're not there. So I kind of wanted to start my business right away, 2018, just motivated. But here we are, 2020, and of course, some outside issues like the pandemic and different things, and plus life takes over. I'm glad I didn't start right away, because I ended up learning a lot about the business, starting an LLC, the different things, learning how to get an EIN code, taxes, California, the state of California, even if you're not making any, as far as revenue, you still pay, and all these different ins and outs and nuances, and then getting very familiar with the USPTO. And like she was stating earlier, with a patent vice a trademark, you start to learn that stuff takes 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
And then if you do want to start the business, they kind of give you the insight of how you would actually put your logo and your business out there without being, you know, copyright infringement or any penalty. So I learned a lot via just LegalZoom and different veteran programs that, you know, you understand the technicalities of running a business. So yes, definitely a good thing. So now I started discovering more veteran programs, and of course, IVMF came along. So I got that started. Then of course the other program started, EBV. So everything has just been constantly evolving over the past year and a half.
Yeah.
So now everything is kind of lined up right. So I'm ready to launch my business, but now this program has just started. So I said I'll put it on hold just to get as many resources from this before I start.
Yeah. No, so that you know that story, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. So I used to say back in the day, and maybe most folks on this call are old enough. I used to tell students that business ownership is more like a videotape than a Polaroid. But my 18-year-old students don't know what either of those two things are anymore. So I can't say videotape or Polaroid, but I think you guys get it. What I'm saying is it's not like a light switch that happens in a moment in time. You know, business ownership is something that evolves over time, and you're gonna have, you know, life intrude. You're gonna have external factors that are beyond your control intrude on your plans for business ownership. And ultimately, there is no right time to launch a business. The right time to get a business off the ground is when you're ready and the environment is ready for that business to launch and grow. So, you know, I think the journey that you just described is exactly correct and appropriate. And you know, I do think you can't do too much to learn about your industry and the market and your customer. And the irony is today, it's never been easier to do that. There are more sources available for you to learn about your potential customer and the industry and the marketplace just by sitting in front of a computer. You know, I'll give you an example. There's a blog or a forum out there for everything. And all you have to do is find that. It's sort of like a counterinsurgency mission. You find them and you insert yourself and you spy. You know, so one of my favorite examples, I had a young woman a few years back, a student who, you know, was invented a product designed for new mothers. It was a nursing kind of product, a breastfeeding kind of product that supported that activity, if you will. But she had never had a child. So she had an idea. She saw, you know, from her, you know, talked to her mother, so she found an internet forum for new mothers, and she created a profile. And you know, you can decide for yourself the ethics of this, but she sort of created a profile as if she was a new mother, and she started asking all kinds of questions about all these new mothers, and her questions were focused around her product and the utility of her product and how it would function. And she was soliciting feedback from, you know, 1,000 members of this forum. All were new mothers. That's like market research gold right there. And she never had to leave her house to do it. You know, I use that example to say, though, still the number one thing that entrepreneurs often don't get right is the market research piece. You know, understanding your customer is critical. So, you know, taking the time to really do that well will make all the difference in the world for you going forward. I don't know how I got on that, but hopefully it's useful.
No, that was good. I'm going to move to Doug's question that he asked in the chat, and then Lamar has a question. We have about 10 minutes left, so we'll see. As of right now, those are the two questions, and then we'll see what time has us after about 10 minutes. So Doug, just to give you a background on his space, he provides providing advisors and subject matter experts to DoD, DOS, and foreign countries. And his question is that his issue is he has to make effort to continuously reach out to veteran business owners in his space to try to learn and network outside of any occasional courtesy call. Most are very reluctant to share their secret sauce and help the next group coming up. So how do you recommend getting past that to show value in mentoring?
So one, offer carefully, but offer to partner. You know, it's natural that if you're reaching out to folks in the same industry as you, that have the same set of customers as you, that they're going to look to you as a competitor? You know, so, and it sounds like if I heard the story right, who is this? Am I talking to John? Who am I talking to?
Doug Hurst.
Doug. I'm trying to find, is Doug's face in there somewhere? Don't see
He's
it.
shaking. He has a bookcase behind him and he's in a blue shirt.
Doug, raise your hand. I don't know how to do it from my screen.
Oh, there, I got him. I got you. So I take it from your question, you're selling to the government, right? You can nod, yes or no. Yeah. So as a little more background on me, I was an Air Force contracting officer. I was the guy that you were selling to. That's what I did in the Air Force. That's why I'm out of the Air Force. But that business is a cutthroat business. Margins are really thin, as you likely know. Getting your foot in the door to develop a history of past performance is a huge deal. You know, one of the things that, but one of the opportunities, lots of folks start out the same place that you are. They start out as a small business, a veteran-owned business, maybe a service-disabled veteran-owned business, et cetera. But over time, they grow out of that qualification. They get too big, they sell too much, they have too many employees. But what's interesting when that happens for a lot of them is while they'll compete as a prime, a lot of them will have the requirement that they have to subcontract some portion of what they do to a underrepresented business, women-owned business, veteran-owned business, et cetera. Be that sub. You know, create the conditions such that you're teeing up an offer to them to, listen, I can open the door to you to compete on some things that maybe you can't. Let me be the prime on a contract that you can't go after because of your size, because of your categorization, et cetera, and mentor me and support me in that process. You know, it's about creating incentives. How do you create the incentive other than tell me what you know, tell me your secret sauce? You're probably not going to get anywhere with that, even if you frame it as mentorship. But if you can create some incentives for them to crack the door open a little bit in a way that benefits them as well, you're probably more likely to get somebody's attention. And honestly, that's what I recommend to small businesses who are doing. You know, I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of young businesses doing business with the government, because that doing that business could actually end your business as well. It takes one failed bad contract and that's it. And you're done, because you know, as a contracting officer, the first thing I would do after an RFP closes and I'm looking at my set of bidders is I look up the past performance. And whether I'm an Air Force contractor and you've never done business with the Air Force before, but you've done business with the Army or the Coast Guard or the Navy, I can see your past performance. And if you have one hiccup in there, it's for me, the risk is too great. And I won't award that contract to you because I'm not supposed to. So for me, the safer way to build past performance for young companies that are trying to build a book of business with the government is to do it as a partnership with a larger business. So you can claim that past performance, you can point to your role in those past successful contracts without assuming all of the risk associated with being the prime.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry, I accidentally forgot to unmute myself. I'm going to move now to Lamar, and I would say we have about 5 minutes, so we're going to make this our last question. I just have, because I want to ask Dr. Haynie one more question just to leave us with some final advice. So Lamar, please take over. Ask your question.
Right here.
Hey, Lamar, I got you. I see you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. My question is a little bit of everything that you discussed, and I think it's like the working with the spouse is kind of making a decision and all of these things sort of in my head. But the reality is I think some of the challenges I had with sharing my ideas was because of all of the negative feedback that I received in it, and it caused me to have doubt in even making the decision to even go to, for a business. So I appreciate this kind of a forum because I think I'll finally get some support. You know, that's huge when you're sitting at home and you're thinking of an idea or a business and you're like, well, why do you want to do something like that? You got a great job, or, you know, what we're going to do. So it's always been a fear-based thing with me, and reluctancy to share ideas was because of the support and the negative feedback. So I appreciate the forum because I will absorb everything. Some of the things that you discuss in regards to the restaurant industry, I'm thinking of a business that's related to food, sort of a niche market, hot dogs in particular, and all the crazy things you can do with a hot dog, similar like a Chipotle or something like that. Pretzel dogs, stuff like that. I just have a lot of crazy thoughts in my head about what I can do with this hot dog. So, and you know, I'm inspired by companies like Slutty Vegan and anything on diners, drives, and dive-in because they're just popular. They've got a huge niche. I guess because I'm looking at what's around in my area and I'm sort of thinking about sort of how to present that to my customer base, because I love a good hot dog. It's like, will I learn, will I get that network in this particular forum where I can reach out?
So let me say, so let me say a couple things to you about that. Let me start with, you know, and I'm not normally, you know, I don't show my soft fuzzy side very often, but I do want to say something about the negative feedback piece where you started. This from in you know, making it personal for a second. This was the hardest thing for me when I started doing this work. I took it deeply personal. You know, if you know, one of the things about the IBMF and the EBV program from the very beginning, my condition for my own university to launch this program was that it was going to be free. I was so personally bothered by the idea of asking any of you to pay for anything. I thought it was offensive, but think about it. That creates a very challenging business model, where you don't generate any revenue from your customer. That meant for me that I had to go ask people for money. I had to go raise money from people to fund this work and fund these programs. And the point of that story is, I took every single no. It was like a little piece of my soul got cut out. I took it personal. It hurt. I was upset, and that is a version of the negative feedback that you're describing. And I had to learn how to blow it off. I can tell you right now, sitting here, I guarantee you, I've been told no more times than anybody, now over 14 years, more times than anybody that's part of this forum. You know, I thought, I told you I was a Air Force contracting officer. I thought, well, shit, it's going to be easy. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Boeing, and I'm going to go to Lockheed, and I'm going to go to General Dynamics, and all these companies that I awarded billions of dollars of contracts to. And I'm going to tell them, listen, I need you to help me. I need you to become a sponsor of this program. We're going to start to help veterans become small business owners. Not a single yes for 2 years from any defense contractor. It made me angry. I took it personal. Today, you can tell me no all day, and it doesn't even bother me anymore. And I think it's because I figured out how to believe in what I'm trying to do, and help myself understand that all that matters is I believe it and I'm passionate about it. And then also find the people that do believe. And I don't put myself around, I don't put myself in a position where I'm around people who don't believe in what I'm trying to do anymore. I don't hire them. If I do hire them by mistake, they don't stay very long. You know, the folks that we partner with, the other organizations, the funders, et cetera, you know, now we sometimes say no. You know, if I don't believe you want to support what we do for the right reasons, we won't take your money. And that's a sea change from where I started. And I think you can learn, you know, how to be resilient in the context of all that negative feedback. And hey, listen, maybe there's a nugget of something in that negative feedback that you can use to refine your idea, but you can't take it personal. So there's the one thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is you glossed over, but I want to highlight something very important that you said. You used the word niche in the context of the business that you want to create. You use the word something unique, different. That simple little idea is more powerful than you know. You know, if you think about how businesses compete, there's really at its core, there's really two fundamental competitive strategies for all business, really. One of those strategies is to compete based on price. And that's what Walmart does, right? That's what, you know, and that is a horrible, almost impossible place for you to be. Because then you're trying to build a business with margins that are nickels and dimes. You have to compete based on differentiation. You have to compete by finding a niche and finding something unique and different. You know, you're going to struggle to be successful if you launch just another hot dog stand, right? Because then the only basis for you to compete with other people selling hot dogs is to undercut their price by a couple pennies, because the consumer's indifferent, right? If a hot dog is a hot dog, the consumer is going to go naturally to the cheapest hot dog. But if you create, it's why, back to my favorite example, it's Starbucks. It's why I pay $2.80 every morning at the Starbucks on the corner for a cup of coffee. Because somehow they've created a differentiated value proposition where I feel like I'm getting something more than coffee when I buy, you know, even though Dunkin' Donuts and the gas station are, you know, three storefronts on either side, and I could literally save $1 a day. I'm going into Starbucks because somehow it makes me, they've created this differentiated value proposition, this niche. And that's what you have to figure out for your business. You know, how are you going to take a hot dog and turn around and create an offering that's different from everybody else, that's unique from everybody else? And there's all kinds of examples in the restaurant space of where that's happened very successfully. You know, there's what's that pizza place? Blaze Pizza, right? Unique pizza concept. They make it right there in front, you know, so the pizza's maybe not all that different, but how you get it, how you order it, how they deliver it to you, it's differentiated. What's that other chain? Core Life? What's it called?
Core Life Eatery.
Core Life Eatery.
Right. It's just a bunch of salads, right? But they figured out a way to create a differentiated value proposition. They've built this narrative around healthy and organic and the important takeaway of all this is differentiation equals bigger margins. You can charge a higher price because you're not competing on price at that point. You're competing on something other than price. So for you, the key, without knowing any more about your business than what you just told me, I'll tell you, for you, the key is figuring out how to be different. It could be how you package it. It could be how you cook it. It could be how you present it to the customer, but figuring out how to be different. And I'll say this with 100% confidence, not knowing anything else about your business, that'll be the thing that makes or breaks you. You can figure that out, you're good. If you go out there and just launch another hot dog stand, you're in trouble, man. You're in trouble. Does that work?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And Dr. Haynie, I know we're just a little bit over, but I did want to ask you one final question. Just to let you know, this cohort has received a book as an additional resource for them called The Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman. It was recommended to us by our good friend Randy Blass at Florida State University.
That's the guy I mentioned, by the way, everybody, my Air
Yes.
Force buddy. We taught together at the Air Force Academy, and we've been collaborating for the past 12 years on this stuff.
And it's been an awesome resource, and I know some of this cohort has already dove into that book. My question to you would be is if you could recommend one book for this group to read, what would it be?
That's a hard one.
I should have sent it to you beforehand.
Yeah,
but
you
I just thought about it.
You should have sent it to me beforehand. How about I do this? Because I don't want to just throw a bunch of book titles out there. How about I send Deanna, I send you 3 that you
Sounds good.
Send out to this group. You know, and speaking of books, I'm surprised he didn't I don't know if Randy told you, he has his own book that is about to hit Amazon. I'm surprised. Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't send everybody a copy of his own book. That'd be a little more like Randy. But I will send 3 titles out. You know, for me, I like, I learn the most from entrepreneurs themselves who tell their stories. You know, so, and I'm blanking on the title, but Howard Schultz put out a book a few years back that sort of told the story of how Starbucks was created, and I found that book really compelling. But I will send you 3 titles that you can share with this group.
Great, thank you so much. And I just want to say again, Dr. Haynie, thank you so much for taking you know, a good hour and a half out of your evening to join us for this first webinar for this inaugural course that we've put together. And thank you everyone for joining us. We did record this session specifically because of the information that we knew Dr. Haynie would provide us. So we will make sure to post a link to that in Blackboard for you if you want to go back, and for those who couldn't be here tonight. And just to let you all know, just to remind you, next Wednesday, we're moving into, so next week we're moving into value creation and design thinking. We got some great videos up for week 2. And we also have for next Wednesday, Sean Brannigan joining us. We're gonna post his bio, a link to that. He's gonna be really, he's actually a professor that's here at Syracuse University at the School of Newhouse Communications. He really, I should say, dynamic in a way that he really focuses a lot of his teaching in entrepreneurship. And he actually, if you take a look at his bio, he's been involved in a couple of different companies as well in helping run that business and actually selling the businesses for quite a big profit. But really his niche, so to speak, is communication, personal branding, design thinking, problem solving. You know, how do you go about doing all of that? So he's going to be phenomenal to field questions off of. So please make sure that you watch those videos. It'll help you prepare for Wednesday. So again, Dr. Haynie, thank you so much for joining us. We will communicate to everyone via email. Let me know if you have any questions. If you have any follow-up questions from this, please feel free to shoot them into the Ask the Expert. And if we can't get Dr. Haynie to answer those directly, we can get someone. He should be answering those. He nodded his head.
You'll get me.
We'll make sure we get him to answer those. But again, we really thank everyone for joining us tonight. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you very much. See you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.